The finale to Blood on the Tracks is finally here, and if y'all didn't see the other two videos, Blood on the Tracks is about a boy named Seiichi and his overprotective mother, Seiko. On a hiking trip, Seiko pushed her nephew in front of Seiichi, manipulating the entire family into thinking it was just an accident. The story follows Seiko's abusive manner towards Seiichi throughout the first 6 volumes. The last video ended with Seiichi going to jail for murdering Shige, as Seiko announces that she has given up being a mother. Now, I am very excited but also extremely nervous to see what happens next, so again, let's just go straight into it. Volume 13 begins with a dream sequence, as everything in Seiichi's world is fading away. He wakes up from the dream in his own apartment. The year is 2017, 22 years after the trial, as we see an older version of Seiichi, now 36 years old. He wakes up, goes to work at a food factory, comes back home, and repeat. He still keeps in touch with his father, and they plan to meet up soon. They reunite after a long time apart, and they go out to eat at a restaurant. His dad tries hard to make conversation, even asking if Seiichi is seeing somebody, but Seiichi just replies, "Who would ever want to be with a person like me?" After they finish eating, his father asks if he's really okay with never seeing her again. Seiichi responds, "Of course. Why would I want to?" They say their goodbyes, and Seiichi walks home in the dark, with an image of Shige walking behind them. Seiichi tells Shige that he'll be there soon. Since he's already dead inside, he's just waiting for the outside to catch up. 2 months have passed, and Seiichi is slightly haunted by Seiko. After getting in trouble at work, he receives a call from the hospital about his father. He rushes there and stutters while speaking to the front desk receptionist. When he enters the hospital room, he sees his father lying in bed. His father has suffered a ruptured bowel, and although the surgery was a success, there's a chance he might still die due to his overall poor health. We get flashbacks to when Seiichi was in a juvenile detention center, where his father would visit him almost every day. After Seiichi was released, they moved to a new location to start fresh. After high school, Seiichi decided to move to Tokyo because he wanted to be alone. Even then, his father would still call him every single day, though Seiichi would sometimes purposely ignore the calls. After a few days, his father regained consciousness, and Seiichi visits him immediately. His father tells him to go to his house, take the money in the drawer, and read the letter in his bag. Seiichi tells him to just cut it out, but before leaving, his father says that he's sorry for everything and asks Seiichi to hold his hand as he goes to sleep. The next day, Seiichi receives the call that his father has died. He takes the body back to his dad's house and prepares for the funeral. Not knowing what to do, he remembers the letter in the drawer. He opens it and finds an envelope with cash. The letter says that he wants the funeral to be as minimal as possible and for his bones to be buried at the family tomb. However, the letter also reveals that he had paid 80 million yen to Shige's parents in damages and blames himself for pushing both Seiko and Seiichi into a corner. Lastly, he leaves Seiichi with Seiko's contact information. Seiichi rips up that part of the letter and burns it. Now that his father is dead, he's truly alone, and there's nothing left for him to do. In his mind, he briefly sees Seiko and the place where she lives, but instead, he gets on a train and returns to his hometown. He goes to bury his father's ashes, and with that, it's finally over. He begins to think about how he wants to die, but suddenly, a child bumps into his leg. Another child runs over and apologizes, this one looking a lot like Fukishi. Then, an older Fukishi arrives and apologizes to Seiichi. The volume ends with Fukishi and her kids walking away and Fukishi locking eyes with Seiichi. Fukishi asks Seiichi if they've ever met before, but he tells her that they haven't. He walks away, but Fukishi suddenly recalls a memory of a younger Seiichi and calls out, "Seiichi?" He continues walking without turning back. Fukishi's daughter asks if there's something wrong, but Fukishi says that it's nothing and tells her that their father is waiting for them. Seiichi returns to Tokyo and buys a rope to attempt to break his neck using a doorknob. He gets drunk and begins talking to an imaginary Shige, apologizing for making him wait so long. He stumbles over to the noose and wraps it around his neck. Just as he's about to go through with it, his vision blurs, and he sees an upside-down face screaming at him, "Seiichi, just what do you think you're doing?" stopping his attempt. He tries again, but a voice in his head calls him selfish and mocks him, saying things like, "You think you could just die?" Seiichi is still tormented by Seiko, unable to end his own life. The next day, he wanders around the city searching for ways to die, but ultimately, he can't go through with any of them. Seiko's giant eyeball appears in the clouds, watching him. Then suddenly, he receives a call from a random number. He tries to ignore it, but accidentally answers on the way to work. The call is from the police station. They have Seiko in custody. She began wandering the streets talking nonsense after being kicked out of her apartment. As the officer explains the situation, Seiichi is running through this train station, his world distorting around him, the officer asking if he can pick her up. But Seiichi says that he needs to end it quickly and jumps towards an oncoming train. However, Seiko's spirit appears and grabs onto him, stopping him. Seiichi just sits there in silence as Seiko's spirit hugs him. He goes to the police station where the officer tells him that Seiko had been carrying around his contact information and an old photo album. The officer leads him to her room. When Seiichi opens the door, he's terrified. We see from behind a withered, dirty old woman. Another officer tells her that her son is here, but Seiko turns around and says, "I don't have children." Strangely, she looks exactly the same as she did 22 years ago. This moment calls into question about how reliable Seiichi's perspective is. It's clear that Seiko has clearly aged a lot. I mean, just look at his father. And I didn't really notice this before, but when Seiichi in the perspective of his mother a couple volumes ago, she looked a lot older than from what we usually see her as. So it's likely his psyche is just deteriorating under the weight of trauma, or it could just be his obsession with her that's making her look younger than what she actually is. Seiko doesn't recognize Seiichi, and when the police tell her who he is, she panics and says that she has to pick Seiichi up from kindergarten. Seiichi's stutter returns intensely as he asks what he's supposed to do with her. The police ask if he could take her to his place, but he refuses. Instead, he offers to pay her rent, which Seiko accepts. They go to her apartment and Seiichi informs the landlord that he'll be covering her rent. The landlord is skeptical, pointing out that she's never seen her before. Seiko interjects, saying that it's fine, she doesn't mind being homeless. But suddenly Seiichi interrupts and insists on paying her rent in full, which the landlord accepts. As the police leave, Seiko and Seiichi are left alone. She invites him in for tea, but he hesitates and eventually steps inside. As he sits down, Seiko approaches with a cup of tea and says, "Oh wait, you're Seiichi. It's been so long." We then get a brief flash of the dead kitten, alive, but now with an angry expression, and we cut to Seiichi's furious face. He grabs the cup of tea and throws it in Seiko's face. He raises his fist to punch her, but he stops himself, questioning why he has to keep on suffering like this. Seiko suddenly appears as a child, begging him to kill her. Seiichi tells her to do it herself and walks out, promising to keep paying the rent, but never to return. Outside the apartment, he turns back and sees Seiko's true form, crying, broken, and lying on the ground. He walks to a park and stops. Shige appears next to him and Seiichi begins ranting about how it was a mistake to see his mother again, how he hasn't changed at all. Shige agrees, he hasn't changed, but then transforms into a monstrous version of Seiko, berating him for blaming everything on her. She tells him that it's really his fault that he ended up like this. Seiichi tries to get violent, but Seiko just laughs, and saying that the only murderer here is him. As Seiichi screams at her to shut up, everything suddenly stops. The volume ends with Seiichi walking home, Shige by his side saying, "You're gonna see her again, aren't you? Soon, I bet." At the very end of the volume, there's a letter from the mangaka Shuzu Oshimi, detailing his own tormented experience with his own mother. I highly recommend pausing and reading the entire letter. It just adds a very deep layer of realism and emotional weight to this story, making the entire series feel very deeply personal and grounded in real trauma, more than pretty much what it already was. 2 months have passed, and a super typhoon is set to hit Tokyo the next day. Shige is demanding that Seiichi go visit his mother. As Seiichi walks in the rain, he questions why he's even doing this. What happens if he actually hits her this time? Well, at least on the bright side, he could die too. As he arrives, he sees Seiko outside. Seiko approaches Seiichi and asks if he could help her look for her cat. The two of them begin walking through the streets, searching while Seiichi wonders if Seiko is pretending not to know what's happening. As they continue, Seiko calls out to the cat, saying that she needs to bring him in or else he'll die in the typhoon. Suddenly, the illusion breaks and Seiichi sees the true Seiko calling out to him. Then, the cat appears, looking exactly like the white cat from the road. They return to Seiko's apartment and Seiichi asks if she remembers who he is. Seiko completely ignores the question and instead thanks him for paying her rent and offering to make him dinner. As he sits and waits, the white cat approaches him. Seiichi imagines himself as the cat. Seiko returns with dinner and watches as Seiichi enjoys the meal with some sake. After dinner, Seiko tells Seiichi to stay the night because of the typhoon. Seiichi sleeps on the floor while Seiko sleeps next to him on a futon. He asks his mother what he's been doing all this time. And Seiko explains that she has worked many jobs, but one day she saw herself working and just walked out. She stared up at the sky and saw a sunset that she had to put a lid on a long time ago. She gets up and grabs a photo album. "Wanna take a look, Seiichi?" They lay down and look through pictures of Seiichi as a baby, including the cover photo of Volume 1. Seiko recalls how lonely she felt during that time. His father was always working, so she was left alone. She then begins to remember her own childhood at her grandfather's home. Seiko lived with her mother and father, and they all seemed happy. Except that was a lie. Her mother hated her father and his home, so they moved out. After that, her mom would get mad at her dad, and both of them would just get mad at Seiko. When Seiko was 6, her sister was born. Her sister was very sick, and their parents focused all of their attention on her, treating Seiko even worse, telling her that no one needed her. Seiko would retreat to her usual hangout and prey on the downfall of the villagers. Throughout school, she remained very quiet, not wanting to interfere with anyone's happiness. She hated being a human. Back in high school, a friend invited her to join the drama club. Acting was fun for her. She could become someone else, and in doing so, escape her guilt and shame. That year, the drama club traveled to Tokyo to watch a performance, and Seiko was moved by what she saw. At that moment, she decided to become an actor. That winter, her friend invited her to a hangout where Seiko met Ichiro, Seiichi's father, for the first time. She didn't think much of him, except that he was very easy to talk to. At that time, she barely spoke with her family, and they didn't really care that she planned to move to Tokyo. Her sister had gotten a lot healthier, but they didn't talk much either. Her friend grew distant after the move, and Seiko wonders what she's doing right now. Once in Tokyo, she attended acting classes in the morning and worked at a cafe at night, all while going to see performances and hoping to audition. She really wanted to audition for a specific role, but she didn't have the courage. That's when she ran into Ichiro again, and they went out together along with one of his friends. When she told him about the role she wanted, Ichiro's friend commented that all of the women in that performance all had their breasts out, asking if she'll be okay with that. Seiko wasn't sure though, but Ichiro mentioned that he had many of their scripts at home and could share some with her. He wanted to be a poet, and Seiko found that appealing. So, they moved in together into a small apartment. Over time, she stopped watching that performance, and Ichiro grew increasingly frustrated with his poetry. After 4 years, Ichiro decided to move back to his parents' home and asked Seiko to marry him, which she said yes, and gave up on everything else. Seiko met Ichiro's parents and his sister. She had never met anyone like Ichiro's sister before. The first thing that his sister said was, "You're so introverted. What's the deal?" At the wedding, Seiko told herself that she was happy, but she felt so distant from the happiness, and Ichiro's sister could easily tell. A year later, Shige was born. Ichiro's sister told Seiko to have her own child, saying that it would give her something more important to focus on than herself. But Seiko couldn't picture having a baby. She didn't even know if she was glad to have been born herself. Eventually, Seiko did get pregnant, and Seiichi was born. The moment she saw his face, she promised to give him all the love he needed so he wouldn't feel sad and lonely like she had. Seiichi was very dear to her, but even then, she still felt far away from everything. Seiko's sister died before Seiichi turned 1. When she went to see her, Seiko didn't even shed a single tear. In her eyes, everyone was already dead. But then, what about Seiichi? One day while Seiichi and Shige were having a playdate, Ichiro's sister said that she felt sorry for Seiichi because of the way Seiko looked. Seiko asked, "Looked how?" Ichiro's sister replied, "Like you don't care about anything. Like you can't stand yourself." After that, Seiko began becoming clingy towards Seiichi so he couldn't see her face. When Seiichi turned 3, for the first time ever, Seiko felt good for no particular reason. She had an urge to go back to her old hangout spot. Seiko takes Seiichi there, but she remembers watching herself from a distance. Once she was there holding baby Seiichi up, she says that she can't remember what happened next. It's too far away, like a distant memory she can't access. Suddenly, baby Seiichi says, "Say it." Now I don't know if it's the truth or just something that I made up, so say it. Seiko stares, unsure, and asks, "Did I kill you?" The volume ends with baby Seiichi replying, You did kill me. But before we get to the next part, I just want to say that we now have a Discord server. So if you guys want to talk about your favorite series, get recommendations, and just connect with some like-minded fans of mine, then this is the server for you. We'll soon be hosting live community events like games, live reactions, and live readings only on the Discord server. So if you want to be involved in this, then why not scroll down and join our community. Also, we just opened up a Patreon, so if you guys want early access videos, uncensored videos, and just to support the channel in general, then why not go ahead and check out the Patreon. But back to the video. Seiko tries to remember and asks Seiichi if she threw him off the hill. He replies that it seems that way, and then Seiko throws him off. The scene shifts to Seiko pushing Shige, and Seiichi asking if she killed Shige too. Seiko says that she did, and that it was so beautiful. It was so sad, and so beautiful. We then see a child version of Seiko talking to the present day Seiichi saying, "I'm sorry I killed you." Seiichi replies that he got killed, but she must have gotten killed as well by all kinds of things. She got killed, and so she killed someone else. The two of them stand next to each other at the edge of the cliff and say, "So beautiful." The scene shifts to Seiichi walking with the child version of Seiko. They encounter the cat on the road, and the kid Seiko begins to pet it. She says that the cat is cold, and Seiichi pets it too, replying, "Sure is." Seiko then says, "Get warm," and Seiichi holds her hand. Suddenly, the cat wakes up and begins playing with Seiko as Seiichi watches, smiling. The cat jumps on them, and they all share a group hug. Seiichi wakes up and the typhoon has passed. Seiko asks if he wants any breakfast, but Seiichi says no and gets ready to leave. Just before he walks out the door, Seiko thanks him. Seiichi tells her goodbye and that he'll see her soon. As he opens the door, the cat runs out and leaves the apartment, roaming through the neighborhood. Now this whole flashback of Seiko's backstory is just super interesting for so many reasons. First, it's really cool to see the little details and behaviors that Seiko has, now explained through trauma and bullying. Stuff like why Seiichi sees that really creepy smile whenever he looks at Seiko, the reason why she pretends not to know what's going on most of the time, and just a lot of the stuff that she's been doing and phrases that she says. Second, it gives a whole new perspective on Seiichi's aunt. I gave her the benefit of the doubt before, assuming like her actions were just the result of her son almost dying. But now it's also a weird feeling because she's not a good person as we see her bullying Seiko, but she's also not a bad guy either. And finally, the flashback really made me feel sympathetic towards Seiko. Honestly, I kind of saw this thing coming, but I didn't think I'd actually like it. After seeing her full backstory and Seiichi's attempt to move on from it, I think the story deals with everything in a very mature and positive way. After that night, Seiichi continued working. He doesn't visit his mother nor does he talk to her, and he begins to rebuild his life, cleaning up his room, reading books, not drinking, and eventually, his suicidal thoughts disappear. One night though, he's visited by Shige, who tells Seiichi that he doesn't need him anymore. Shige then walks off into a field where he's greeted by his mother. Suddenly, Seiichi wakes up to a phone call. It's the hospital. Seiko has fallen down a set of stairs. Seiichi rushes to the hospital and sees Seiko in a hospital bed, bruised and beaten. She sees him, but she doesn't say a word. A police officer pulls Seiichi aside and explains that she fell down the stairs at a bridge, but also mentions that she might have just tripped and fell. Seiichi then begins to imagine that Seiko might have done it on purpose. The officer tells him that in a state like this, someone needs to take care of her. The doctor says that she needs to stay in the hospital overnight as a precaution. Seiichi sits next to her and asks how she's feeling. Seiko begins to mutter something, and when Seiichi leans in closer, she quietly tells him that she's fine and just needs to leave her alone. The next day, Seiichi takes Seiko home, but she refuses to do anything. Seiichi brings her groceries, but she doesn't move a muscle. He goes to work, and when he comes back, she's still in the exact same position, telling him again that she's fine and that he should leave her. Seiichi prepares a pork bun for her and just ends up feeding her that day. Day after day, Seiichi continues taking care of her, and one day he comes home to find her asleep and that there's a terrible smell in the air. He realizes that Seiko had soiled herself. As he gets closer, he sees her face and his vision begins to distort. He takes her to the bathroom, strips off her clothes, and begins to shower her. As he washes her, he imagines her skin melting, spilling over his hands. Seiko calls out, telling him to just leave her. He stops washing her and dries her off. The next day, the landlady approaches Seiichi and asks if Seiko is doing okay. Seiichi says that she's not, but the landlady says that she came to collect the rent that they didn't pay last month. Seiichi tells her that they're moving out immediately and that he'll pay both last month's and next month's rent. He goes back into the apartment and tells Seiko that she's moving into his place. If she's just going to fall apart and come undone, then he's going to watch it all happen. The volume ends with Seiichi and Seiko moving out of her apartment while Seiichi carries her over to his place. Now the next volume is the finale, and as for predictions, I'm guessing that Seiichi might want revenge and the satisfaction of watching his mother die slowly, but right now I'm honestly not too fond of that ending. It kind of defeats the purpose of everything that we just saw in the flashback, but still, let's just see what happens next. Seiichi has taken in his mother, now looking extremely withered and depressed. He feeds her, changes her diaper, and takes care of her entirely. One night after coming back from work, Seiichi walks in to find Seiko asleep, but he imagines her as a baby. He lays next to her and he smiles, gently patting her on the chest. We're shown drawings and journal-like entries detailing what Seiko did that day and how much weight she has lost. Seiichi is seen just staring at Seiko, ignoring calls from his job, and it becomes clear that Seiko is nearing death. She has lost a significant amount of weight and continues to wither away. Seiichi tells her that he will stay with her, watching until the very end. That night as he watches her, he begins to imagine himself as a child, sitting with Seiko in a restaurant. Seiko stares at him and tells him not to just sit there, but to say something. She calls him out for being so silent and serious, just like his father. But Seiichi replies that she's actually the one who's never talked and always looks so serious. Seiko then says that he's never looked past her face. He couldn't see that there wasn't anything special about her, and she asked him why he didn't just laugh it off. Seiichi replies that he could never do that. As a child, he was desperate. He needed her to love him. He was terrified that she didn't love him, and because of that, he hated her. He hated her for not loving him. So in his mind, he killed her, and that guilt almost killed him. But then Seiko just laughs at him, saying, "Me? Not love you? I always loved you." Seiichi is stunned. He quietly responds that he loves her too. The two begin to playfully insult each other, calling each other names and pointing out each other's flaws, all while laughing and having fun for the first time in what feels like forever. At the end of their conversation, Seiko smiles and says, "Well, bye Seiichi." Seiichi wakes up and calls out to his mother, but she doesn't respond. He goes to check on her and finds that she has passed away. He takes a moment, quietly staring at her corpse and her now lifeless body, looking all over her features, and then after a long silence, he smiles and bursts out laughing. Seiichi walks to the window and sees that it's raining outside. He goes out and strolls through the neighborhood, gazing up at the beautiful sky just like Seiko used to do whenever she felt free. Now, Seiichi is finally free, soaking in the moment as the storm consumes him. The scene shifts to Fukishi. She and her husband are driving past the town and she decides to take a quick look around. She visits the tunnel where she and Seiichi once made out, and then she goes to Seiichi's old house, only to find that it's no longer there. She tells her husband about Seiichi, how he used to live there, and admits that she doesn't know whether he's alive or dead, but still, she says she hopes he's alive. That night, Seiichi has a dream about Shige, except Shige is older now, living in some unfamiliar town. He had grown up and lived a full life, and the thought of it made Seiichi feel happy. We then cut to the future. Seiichi is now an old man, living a peaceful life. He takes walks, reads books under a tree, and seems content. One day, while walking home, he glances up at the quiet sky, and then suddenly, he thinks about Seiko. The series ends with the manga shifting into full color. Seiichi tries to remember what his mother looked like, but her face is hazy. He can't remember what his mother's face looks like. And that is the end of Blood on the Tracks. Man, I honestly have no idea how to feel about this ending. A part of me feels like it could have ended with the cat running out of the apartment and Shige finally leaving Seiichi alone, but deep down I know it was always meant to end this way. There is no way this story would conclude without Seiko dying and Seiichi finally finding some kind of peace. Still, what an emotional roller coaster this entire ending turned out to be. And despite everything, I really liked it. In fact, I think it made the series a whole lot better as a whole. Overall, I absolutely loved this series. If I had to point out any flaws, maybe I'd mention the pacing, but even then, that just feels super minor compared to how incredible the rest of the story was. It's honestly hard for me to critique something like this because it just felt so deeply personal, so raw and real, that reading it almost felt like I was intruding on someone's actual trauma. And according to the mangaka himself, that's kind of the point. The series feels real because many of the emotional beats and psychological moments were inspired by his own real-life experiences. In the final volumes, we get letters and personal notes from Oshimi sharing his thoughts and feelings about certain scenes, and that extra layer just adds on to the psychological weight and emotional horror of the story. I give this series a solid 10 out of 10. It was surprisingly quick to read, the art was consistently phenomenal, and the symbolism, while sometimes very confusing, was still very clear enough to just hit hard and understand. The messaging, the emotional depth, the disturbing yet captivating character arcs, all of it just worked. It was uncomfortable, it was haunting, and yet it was so human. Oshimi truly gave this series everything that he had, and now I'm kind of terrified of my own mother. But thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember to join the Discord server and the Patreon. The link will be in the description below. And if you like more horror videos like this one, then why not scroll down and hit the subscribe button. But I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.